Well, it's 12:31, and well, let's get started because we have some introductory material at the beginning, and so people still won't miss any substantive thing if they come in. You know, I consider in Zoom time 12:05 is on time, but that's okay. They'll pick up on what's going on. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to the webinar on the BMRC Archives portal. We're sitting in front of a Zoom background. That's a lovely community kitchen. It's got the espresso machine, which is an essential, and brightly colored mugs in blue, green, yellow, and red, and some fruit for the healthy-minded. John and I are sitting in front of a counter. I'm Laurie Lee Moses. I'm the BMRC portal archivist. I'm a white woman with chin length, light brown hair, medium brown hair. I wear glasses, and I'm wearing a tan jacket with a black shirt underneath.
I'm John Jung. I'm a senior programmer analyst at the University of Chicago Library. I'm a white man. I have a reddish hair, and I wear glasses. I have a dark shirt with buttons on it.
So thank you for joining us today as we discuss the ideas and approaches we use to cook up the new BMRC Archives portal. Let's see, I already did that. We're excited about the opportunity to share our work with you and talk about some of the challenges and some of the thought-provoking aspects of the design of the project. First, a couple of notes. As you probably heard, we are recording, and we will put the video up on the BMRC YouTube channel soon. Also, there are Zoom Live captions and transcript that are enabled, and you can control this feature. You will either see the three dots, or you will see the icon will be labeled transcript, so you can change that to the options you prefer. We would love for you to put your questions in the Q&A. We will also monitor chat, which is a good place for responses and informal discussion. We've already had a couple of nice comments during the webinar. However, we will start with questions in the Q&A at the end of our talk. And you can put those in at any time just as they occur to you. I'm going to now share my screen and get started. There's always just way more clicks than I really would like. I'll start this from the beginning. So we've already introduced ourselves. And, you know, we're going to cover a lot of material. There was a lot that went into it. It was the project went from May 2020. We launched in March of 2022. So we'll miss some things that you might be interested in. But please put them in the Q&A, and you can email us at any time, and we'd love to talk about the work. So the mission and vision of the BMRC includes supporting collections work at member archives and helping to illuminate and increase awareness of and access to primary sources on Black experiences. Many of you are probably familiar with the BMRC, but for those that aren't, we are a consortium, not a repository, and we have 21 members now in the Chicago area. As you may see from this slide filled with a variety of institutional logos, BMRC members include university and college archives, public and private libraries, museums, arts-based, government, and community organizations. The consortium has a very diverse membership, and we count this as a real advantage. Please visit the main website if you have more questions. You want to learn more about the consortium, our members, our programs, and history. I'll have that link later. So, in the Mellon Foundation grant titled Documenting Black Chicago Through Technology, Sustainability, and Outreach, overhauling and modernizing the collections information database was a key deliverable. The broad scope of this project, along with the wide diversity of our membership, though, made it hard to know where to start. But John and I realized early on that we both wanted to begin with clarifying which values and principles would be the guidelines and the guardrails for the project. Thankfully, we mostly agreed. Also included in regular discussions about the portal development were staff members of the University of Chicago Library's Digital Library Development Center, affectionately known as DLDC, the BMRC team, including our student workers. And in 2021, we convened a portal working group that had lively discussions over that whole year on all aspects of the portal, including design and technology decisions, serving users, challenges in collections work at member institutions, and what features were must-haves versus nice-to-have, the labels, language, and even the name of the portal. Big shout out to you all. So, given the history of prior collections projects that stopped and started based on granting cycles, sustainability was top of the list. It was even in the title of the grant, as you saw. Let's unpack this seemingly simple idea. It's kind of a buzzword, but there's a lot to it, we found. First, the database and website used for search and display had to be easily maintained over the long term, and ideally could mostly be done by BMRC staff rather than programmers. Give us a lot of flexibility and control over the site and updating the site and all of the features. And then ensuring low barriers to participation is an important value to the BMRC as an organization, and therefore also for the project. We needed to make it easy for members to share collections information for the portal. Now, given all the different types of organizations, as you may have seen from the logos, they had differing workflows, different staffing levels, technology platforms and expertise, different roles, you name it. This was not necessarily an easy foundational principle to embrace. Oops. We thought about how to level the playing field, and of course that is a major support for sustainability. To fulfill this commitment, we had to find ways to accommodate that variety of descriptive processes and coding styles and end products, which had deep implications for selecting and designing the database and ingesting records, as well as for gathering and displaying search results. And we'll talk more about this later. On the other side of things, we wanted to try to serve a wide variety of potential end users that might have an interest in Black history and culture. Now, this is a huge potential number of people. That meant we needed to consider a range of levels of research experience, kinds of projects and topics, and address accessibility concerns, and think about common search behaviors as we design the portal. We took a user-centered approach to this, trying to use a holistic viewpoint. I've listed some of the constituents, which includes, as you'll note, member institution staff and reference librarians and archivists. You may not always see as end users community members and creatives. Those are important constituents for the BMRC. Our goal was to make the site welcoming and appealing, providing more discovery pathways to the content while stressing usefulness and usability. And members of the portal working group also shared their knowledge of their own constituents, kind of amplified the user research that I did. I interviewed a variety of users, including undergrads, teachers, and staff who participate in the Chicago Metro History Fair, an art collector and founder of a Black artists organization, as well as advanced scholars in Black studies, including some BMRC fellows. And I hope to do more user research throughout 2022. Now, in thinking about this, it may seem counterintuitive, but I remain convinced that a collaborative approach, incorporating a variety of perspectives and having freewheeling discussions that include people with that range of expertise and experience, yields the most focused, effective, and optimal solutions and can generate really great new ideas. The BMRC Archives project really bore this out. with feedback and user interviews and ongoing discussions with member staff and BMRC constituents, board members, and others, and the Portal Working Group, it actually helped to keep the project focused. Now, part of this is you want to make sure you're prioritizing the right things. So you have to ask people, and all of those discussions feed into it because, let's face it, the natural inclination, if you just let yourself go with all these different stakeholders, you're going to encounter bloat and creep, which are really not things you want to have. So the focus was on prioritizing the must-haves versus the nice-to-have. A lot of people had great ideas about things, features, functions we might include, things that we saw on other websites that were cool. But you got to make the tough decisions. We reviewed a bunch of other sites, and we used GitHub to refine our feature specifications. People could access that and weigh in on it. And later we also used GitHub to document, discuss, track, and fix bugs and other ideas and issues with elements like navigation, possible functional changes, and to review the usability and accessibility issues and much more. So we had to think about what's possible within this time period, this grant, and push things off to phase 2 if need be. And really, I'm trying to encourage you here. Constraints are your friend. Eliminating options is a great way to help you make decisions and move things forward. So take courage, put those other great ideas, and we really want this, but we don't have time right now. Put those on your phase 2 list because simplicity supports sustainability. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, John Jung.
Okay, thanks very much, Laurie. So I'll talk a little bit about the technical infrastructure that we used for the project. This project uses MarkLogic as its database. MarkLogic is an XML native database. So rather than, you call it shredding, rather than taking elements of XML documents and forcing them into a relational database structure, when we take finding aids that are in EAD format, they kind of remain in EAD format once they're inside MarkLogic. And then we can use different XML languages to be able to query them, search them, browse them, and things like that. MarkLogic itself uses XQuery. That's the programming language that we use to write the queries for the system and the sort of infrastructure that powers the search. That's the language that powers the search for the system. It also uses XSLT to be able to format finding aids for display on the web pages. And we use XPath to be able to specify the exact places that things like titles or organizations or topics or things like that are found in each specific finding aid. To be able to format pages for the system, we use Wagtail. Wagtail is a content management system that's based on Django. It's written in Python. That's a system that we use elsewhere in the library to be able to manage digital collections in the library website, the library's intranet. So it's a thing that we have a lot of experience with at the U of C. I want to be able to get into as much technical detail as people want to, but I also want to keep things moving. So if there are more technically specific questions I can answer during the Q&A, please let me know. But otherwise, I'll pass it back to Laurie.
I'm giving you another couple of slides, John. Talk about some of the ways that thinking about data and technology platforms, along with our values and foundational principles, how that worked.
No, it's not a problem at all. So one of the things that I think I run into quite frequently being a programmer in a library is that there will be situations where I could make a choice between fixing an issue in code or fixing an issue in data. And there'll be lots of situations where I'll want to fix issues in data, but I think based on the kind of place that I fit in the organization and the place that data comes from, there's, I think, a lot of pressure to be able to fix things in code rather than in data. So that was the thing that we had talked about a lot on the project. And it's a place where a lot of potential complexity can creep in because, for one thing, EAD is a very flexible format. It allows for lots of different ways to express things. I think what can end up happening is that if you're not careful, that can create a situation where between the complexity of EAD and just the kind of natural pressure in a library to try to fix things in code, to try to treat data as sacred, is that it can create more complex code than I would ordinarily like. So I think that was a topic that we had talked about pretty frequently, actually, as far as were there situations where we actually wanted to fix something in code, or was that something that we could try to push back on a little bit from the data side? There are always trade-offs and things like that to consider. And I think that a lot of these issues were things that we had to think about on a case-by-case basis. But I do think that it was a strength of the project that we got to talk about them in that way. I talked a little bit about how EAD is very flexible. And so I think, oh, Laurie, I just want to confirm, is this still mine? Or did you want to jump in on this one? Okay. So EAD is, I would say, flexible to the point that you can identify individual finding aid authors when you look at EAD. I think that once you get comfortable looking at it, you sort of can get a sense of the human that actually wrote specific markup for a finding aid. So on our end, trying to manage the complexity of that, it creates an issue because if we have finding aids that are coming from lots of different sources, from lots of different institutions, potentially different authors inside each institution, and potentially those people's approaches to writing an EAD document have evolved over time. So we have people that have been writing EAD for years, and you can imagine that their kind of approach to authoring the format would change. It does create situations where different things could be expressed in pretty radically different ways. And so we have to look for ways to enforce some consistency on those things so that they'll display in a standardized way. One of the qualities of using an XML database is that rather than having us enforce consistency when we first ingest finding aids, it lets us put that decision off a little bit. So the system itself can handle an awful lot of complexity because we're storing finding aids as native XML. It does create a situation where we can, I think, handle complexity that's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more rich than we would if we were flattening things out into a simpler type of data structure from the get-go or when we first ingest things. Again, it creates situations where there's a lot of negotiation that happens. So as we're implementing certain features or looking at certain ways that things behave, we would have discussions, I think, pretty late in the process about where we would want to extract certain elements or where different things happen. And I think that that's an approach that has pros and cons. I think there are both good and bad qualities to doing it that way. I think doing that, putting those decisions off until later because it's a native XML database was a thing that was interesting. And I think it let us kind of have more in-depth discussions than we might have been able to have if we had sort of flattened things out on ingest.
I want to just add that in order to keep the low barrier for participation, we also need to think about in our data consistency and display discussions, institutions that aren't using EAD, aren't using XML, and what they are using, how we can help them. There are different options for that. I created a Google form that they could use to do the basic description, but people have description in a lot of different formats, and then to think about, well, how can we be flexible in taking that into the system was another thing to think about, another way to accommodate more flexibility and within, and also using extremely flexible standard. I mean, I think there's some discussion that maybe John and I would want to engage in about are we going to stick with EAD or are there other interesting options there? But that's for another day. So I'm going to stop sharing right here. Here's the main link to the site. That's the home page to the portal. And please, while we're showing you the site, my team members will help us to pick up any questions that you may have about actually taking a look at the site. So here we go. Got to stop and then go back. Okay. All right, so this is the main page, and I want to do that just to show you how to get to it. It says search collections is where you want to go. And here is the home page for the portal itself. You'll notice that we try to provide different kind of ways into the content. Discoverability pathways is kind of the phrase that's used. We have a search bar, which you're used to seeing, of course. And then you can browse by the different facets or categories, and you can see them here. Archives would be all the institutions, the member institutions. You can see everything that is held by one institution from going there. This tells you a little bit about how to use the site. There's an About the Project page. There's also, you can get up here, the Research Help page. And here, and then you see in the middle different ways to kind of get into the topics and materials and information in addition to search and browse. These are curated topics. I'll just pop into it and go back out. So this is a project that's ongoing. It's in development. It will be basically a controlled vocabulary with input from subject matter experts, knowledgeable people, and they will help us choose terms that are really important for the study of this domain of knowledge in general. And for each topic we choose, there will be a image from one of the member collections, a description about what the topic is, and then basically there's a curated search for that topic. There are a few already in place, and then you can see how to get involved or tell people you know to help us out with that. I'm going to go back to the portal homepage. We put together a little sort of example exhibit on Black designers, and you can look at that. There are also other exhibits listed there from member institutions and the BMRC 15-year exhibit. Now you can see I refreshed the page and I got something else on this right-hand side. And Voice of Hope is an organization, and that's another way to kind of just look around and see what's there. When you go back, and there's something else you could look up. So especially if you're just exploring the subject area and so forth. We talk about our members, and this changes once a month, a little bit about BMRC, about the portal. So I want to go ahead and show you direct search. And I put the weird capitalization in there because it doesn't matter, just so you know that. And you see here the search results page. There are quite a few results. So you have different ways you can look at it. Of course, you can go through each page. You've got the next page. You can go to a numbered page. If I go to page 7, let's see what's on there. And then these are self-explanatory. Relevance is, how strong it is in that topic. And then A to Z is just a listing of the titles, A to Z. And then backwards. Shuffle is a way to kind of just surface more results in a way that is maybe not so directed, so something serendipitous may happen. For example, looking at Daphne Maxwell Reid. I don't know what her relevance is to community development, but I could look that up. And this is the Finding Aid display page. You will see some of the differences that we talked about in style and ways of writing up description and encoding it in EAD. But there are certain things that we try to make more consistent, like this top area. You can see where you can click on things. This information on the left shows you how you can actually get to the materials. So you will see that with each Finding Aid display. This is a table of contents. You can go to the index terms, and these, you can click on these to go further into that search. All right, I want to go back and maybe I'll look at Furman House. Well, I can look over here. You can see the topics, and the number tells you how many collections you would find in that topic. But I want you to notice that you can do view more topics, view more people, view more organizations. So there are more relevant places, decades, etc., than you will see in this first 5. So if we look at view more topics, we can see more topics. And then if you want to see all relevant topics, it takes a minute because there's thousands of them. Well, it doesn't take a minute, and you can also sort these in the same ways that you could the other search results. And these would be all the topics, and you can get right down to where there's only one collection with that topic. And when you can click on this and provide a search. And notice that you see your original query up at the top, and then you see the facet that I just chose in green with an X, so you can knock that out. If you've chosen several more facets, oh, there's only one result, so I'm going to just X this one out. Or if you want to just clear them all, you can hit that link for that, and you get your original search results. So I am going to stop there and see if there's something in the chat or elsewhere that people would really like to see on this demo. Let's see what we've got.
There's one question in the Q&A, not necessarily about the demo, but about the funding sources that the BMRC sought out. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about the Mellon grant.
So I don't know if Marcia would like to chime in on this. So the grant from the Mellon Foundation was applied for and received, I think, before any of the current staff were there. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's sort of hard from my perspective. It's not the budget aspect of it is not my perspective. My perspective is developing the project. So there were several projects contained within this one grant, including hiring me and T. So I don't know, Marcia, would you like to say anything about that?
Sure. Are you able to hear me? Okay, great. So as Laurie mentioned, we received this grant in 2019, which was actually before any of the current staff were a part of the BMRC. And so as far as budgeting, really this portal project was just budgeted in terms of staff time. And so Laurie's position as the BMRC portal archivist was wholly conceived to work on this project, along with related, all the sort of related work to basically revising and overhauling the former portal that we had. And because the University of Chicago is our host institution, we reside within the university library, we were able to work using existing platforms, as John discussed. So using Wagtail and using some of the sort of built-in software and features that are available through the Digital Library Development Center. And so much of the funding for this project is really just in terms of staff time.
I apologize for the live transcription being paused. I had enabled it, and I'm not sure how it got undone, but we will be able to get a transcript to you.
There's one question about the demo. If you could show how to do the facets again.
Oh, sure. Let me see. So I have my results, and let's get one that has a bunch of. Okay, let's look at the 1970s. So you can see here's all the facets. Okay, they're the same categories as the browse. I go to 1970s, and it will show, okay, it's reduced it somewhat, and you can see the top in green is 1970s. If I also want to see, I don't know. I also want to see the 1960s. Why not? And I want to see topics on, I want to see correspondence from that era. So now what I'm seeing is all of those things combined to pull out what's relevant with those facets. I can clear them all at once. I can click the button to close. Maybe I don't want to just see correspondence, change my mind, I'm going to go look at something else. Well, I'm not sure why. Registering there we go. Or you can clear them all at once. Let me know if does that help? You can also view more. You can fold it back in to say view less. You can view more archives. And I want to go to, I'll go to and you can see view all relevant archives, which will be all the archives, and they'll show up here. So I want to go to Shorefront, and it will show you everything in the database with these categories now, and it has the information on how to get to it. Now there are more collections, so if I at the Shorefront, oh, it cleared Shorefront, sorry. Here they are. So when I had the facets engaged, it filtered my search results to 4 because I included that as part of my query. But you can see that if I just look at what is held at Shorefront, there are 7 collections in the system there that have to do with community development, because that is still in my search. Portal search community development, you can see in the breadcrumbs as well.
Great. We have another question about whether the subject terms were derived from the collections or if the list was built in some other way.
John, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So those were actually derived from the collections themselves. So the way that so I'm gonna try to answer this in my apologies if this is too bare bones of an explanation for how this works. But basically the EAD documents are basically a tree structure where different branches have specific node names where we can extract something like a subject, or we know that there's the name of a person or the name of an organization at different places in the document. So the way that the topics and people and other categories in the facets work is that when we first ingest finding aids, we look through each entire tree structure to find different names of topics. We kind of specify where you can find things like that. We look for the names of people. We look for the names of organizations. We look for years to turn them into decades. Once we find those things, we classify each document according to basically the topics, people, the different facets that we found. So that happens in an automatic way, just based on the structure of the EAD document and how things have been marked up in the initial EAD documents. Please let me know if I can answer that in a different way or if I can go into more detail about how that works. But I think at a sort of high level, that's that's basically how those get extracted.
So I see Justin Williams has some questions in the Q&A, and the portal displays data from ingestion of EAD finding aids, yes, and we accept finding aids in different formats, Mark XML, and we can convert text that's in a spreadsheet, say from the Google form, or other text-based document. We do have to convert it to EAD compliant finding aids, but our members don't have to do that. They can stick with their procedures that they always use, and we'll try to work together to make that as seamless as possible. Collection level records will appear for search queries. So I'm not sure what you mean by specific object level records related to this search. Oh, in terms of, is that like when you, I notice, I forget what the platform is, it might be Archivist, where you will get a series result as well as a collection result. Is that what you're asking about? I don't know, Justin. Do I have to? Let me go up here. Participants. I don't know if anybody.
I just allowed Justin to.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I really enjoyed the presentation. Yes, I'm just curious about, so I work at the Southside on Movie Project. We have a number of collections. Not all of them have finding aids created at this moment. So we have the individual records for each object in that collection. And just wondering if you are able to, if someone on our side as a member institution, we would want as many of our films to be found as possible. And so I guess the one question was, do you need from us some form of a collection level description in order to then for an end user to find it? And then when that end user is looking, will they find the collection only, or will they find, like, say, that specific film that may answer their question?
Well, first let me address, I'm not sure what kind of records you have on each item. If it's is it a catalog record, a database record, a Word document for each item?
Sure. No, we have a cataloging system. So yeah, we could generate a number of different types of records for various reasons, but
yeah,
yes.
that would work. I mean, we can work together on this. This, part of the whole thing is this collaborative process. So I did build this little tool that's easy to fill out the form with whatever information you have, which would become the sort of top level descriptive summary, right? And then we could bring in into an XML document the other reports and information that you can get out of your systems and put it together, and we work that way. Is there something, John, you want to add about how you would query to find these things?
I think I'd want to look at the specific data to be able to go into more detail about that.
Great. We definitely can work with you on that.
Great. Maria Victoria has a question of whether you can provide an example of when you had to choose between fixing the code versus fixing the data.
I think a relatively straightforward example would be the way that titles are expressed in EAD, because there are several different places that titles can appear. And as a non-archivist, I find the kind of subtlety between different titles a little, I find overlap between the different uses of titles and the different places that titles appear. So for me, that was one where we did end up fixing that in code. I think there is, I think there's, I guess I would say more code than I would expect to be able to deal with different titles. I know that, working on other projects, I know that Mark has a pretty nuanced way to express what a title is and what the different parts of a title, are. This was a case where I think in EAD, it creates code that we need to manage essentially. So grabbing titles for individual items to be able to display them on a search result page or on the top of a finding aid. There's some subtlety there that we did end up pushing into the code that we didn't solve it on the data side.
Yeah. And I think that is a feature of EAD, right? We talked about how it actually generates a whole bunch of we call edge cases, idiosyncrasies.
Win Hill asked, you mentioned certain aspects were curated. Can you describe what factors were considered in that process? And also what factors did the designers use to determine relevance? Does that vary by member organization?
So the curated aspects, that is sort of a side project that came about as I went through the finding aids and data and looked at how the index terms were assigned. And it was really interesting to see the differences in how terms were assigned with some of the BMRC collections projects teams versus, say, perhaps a larger institution and the collection's gone down the line and is later assigned a term. Oftentimes, I would find that the BMRC teams would choose terms that were much more specific to Black studies, more detailed. They might focus on race discrimination in housing rather than just putting housing or things like that. And so those kinds of more specific terms are more useful in narrowing down your results when you're studying in this area. And so we came upon the idea of creating a list of curated topics. And by that we mean asking people who know the field, who work in the field, who do research, and it doesn't have to be just academics, but anyone who is doing research in the field of Black history and culture. They can share with us, we're inviting them to share with us the terms that are really relevant to the work that they're doing. And also to keep current. I mean, I envision this as a dynamic list because, Black Lives Matter was not a term that long ago. It was, it's fairly recent. So in order to keep up with things that are of current importance, and terms change and so forth. So that's the curated part. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't. Oh, there was another portion of the question.
Laurie, do you want me to take the part about relevance?
Yes.
Okay. So relevance is always a little tricky to talk about with different search systems. MarkLogic uses TF-IDF as the basic algorithm, like a lot of different systems do. But there's also a lot of subtlety to the way that someone can implement that.
What's TF-IDF?
It's term frequency over inverse document frequency. So essentially, I'm gonna try to explain it. I'll try to explain it in layman's terms. Basically, what it does is it looks for words that it looks for the frequency of words in an individual document, and it compares that to the frequency of words in the entire corpus of documents. So a word like a word that occurs commonly, like Chicago, is a word that would occur commonly in our set of documents. Basically, if a word naturally occurs commonly, then it becomes a little bit more difficult for something to get a high TF-IDF score. If a word doesn't occur commonly in the entire corpus, though, and it occurs very frequently in a specific document, then it will get a high TF-IDF score. So that's kind of at a high level, that's how relevance works. One of the things that I think is a pretty noticeable way that we could nudge MarkLogic to be able to change the way that it searches is that Laurie demonstrated that we have capitalization turned off for, we're doing case insensitive searches in the system. So MarkLogic gives us a few different flags that we can set for things like whether a search is case insensitive or diacritic insensitive. And those were things that when we were first setting up the search, we experimented with different combinations of things to be able to get something that felt right for us as we were working. So please let me know if I may have to go into a little more detail offline, but if I can follow up with you on that one, if there are kind of more specifics about the way that relevance works, please let me know.
I find it fascinating. I mean, we see the word relevance all over the place when we're doing searches, and I, for one, really haven't thought about too much about how that's done. I know there's a lot of things go on behind the scenes. Different systems use different kinds of ways to rank that, but that's always an interesting. It's not obvious. It's engineered.
The last question that's in the Q&A, unless folks want to add more, is just whether there's future plans for this project or next phases, expansions, etc.
Well, we sure hope so. We will be working on the curated topics list, as I said, and there's always data cleanup, and along with stressing sustainability, working on sort of ironing out all those workflows, make things easy for people to keep it updated, to send information when it's convenient, where it fits into their processes, kind of making sure that's documented, streamlining that, and making sure that it is in fact working out on their end. I mean, a lot of this is setting up that process is kind of a pilot project, right? Because we have to try it a few times to kind of work out things like that. And of course, as you go along, as I said, people came up with just great ideas, but you can't do everything. So sure, I mean, there's lots of phase 2 ideas that we could work on. I wanted to go back in case, and please, but continue to put in questions and so forth. I'm going to fix my screen here. I just created, in case it's of interest, a brief timeline of the project. Okay, it says you can see me now. So I don't know if this may answer or create questions. So started in May 2020, looking at the data, started meeting with member institutions, and that's continued almost all the way through the project. Working on the values and discussing things. And then in 2021, as I said, we launched the Portal Working Group, which met monthly throughout that time. Somewhere in the spring or summer, I think we got started on a kind of an offshoot group working on curated topics. And you can see the other sort of milestones here. Really heavily working in spring 2021 on mock-ups and wireframes for the design, making decisions, working with a staff person at the DLDC, Kathy Zadrozny, and trying to focus on what is a must-have, that kind of thing, continuing the interview, do user research. We did a soft launch, which, then we surfaced a bunch of bugs, and trying to get the new, throughout 2021, working with people to figure out what would be an easy way to get their updated records and new records. It was a little complicated because I had to see what we already had in the database, had those been updated, working with the member institutions to kind of figure all that out, and then figure out how to get the records and their processes and all that kind of thing. And then finally, lots more, another little coding sprint, I think, was in winter of this year, and more testing, data cleanup, and that kind of thing. And we officially launched on March 14th. And I think that's the last slide we need to look at. Folks got our emails. Please do stay in touch, and send more questions. Something pops into your head. We like to talk about this stuff. It's been a great project. I really appreciated working with John and all the other people that I mentioned. It's just been a lot of people have helped out with this, and I believe they're mostly mentioned on the portal website.
And I really enjoyed working on the project too. It was great to work with BMRC on this and with Laurie on this. Very interesting material, and it was just a really good project to work with. I'm very, very happy that I was able to do it.
If you would like to get involved, helping to build out the curated topics list, as a volunteer projects, really interesting stuff. And you have any ideas from your, working with people providing services, your own work on this type of site or whatever, if you've got great ideas for things that we could put into our future phases, please reach out. Always enjoy talking about possibilities. Is the forum open to add collections? I think the one I was talking about, the Google form, I can send that to you. Is that what you mean? Great. Yeah, we'll be in touch. Sounds like we can get that going. Well, thanks again, and the YouTube recording will be up soon. And we will send out a little reminder to everyone who's registered. So folks that registered but couldn't get here will get it. And so I'm very happy we could do that. And I will make sure that the transcript is included. Thanks, everyone, for spending time with us. Really appreciate it. Appreciate questions. Come by for a cup of coffee sometime.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Allison. I guess I could stop the recording. It's not really necessary at this time.